Analogy I heard from you many times is it's like shooting fish in a barrel. We want to be focusing on that first before going out there into the wide ocean. And without having those systems in place and capitalizing on making sure that we're doing our client approval meetings and collecting our client NPS and encouraging referrals and working on our monetization sheet and getting in touch with our clients to talk to them more, discover more about them, it makes it hard to justify, oh, are we going to go invest in running ads now or something when we haven't even gotten the way we treat our existing clients down pat. I wanted to dive into that a little bit further with you though, Ed. You also mentioned that we don't want to be sporadic. We don't want to be a bit of this, a bit of that marketing. We're going to do a bit of this. And there's a much more systematic way to think about it and to approach it, especially when we're looking at it from the context of our 7 divisions and, division 2 being our marketing. That in terms of the roles and hiring people into this division, how we bring in a strategist, how we bring in a minder, and how do we bring in production people for our marketing. It sort of sounds a bit familiar, right? It sounds familiar to our client manager, senior production manager, deep and narrow teams. So there's a whole other deep and narrow team that we're also building out in our firms so that we can at least approach marketing from a systematic way rather than what's hot right now and I'm going to just chase after it.
Yeah, 100%. And we see people do that and just dip their toe in it and then come back out of it because they're not committed to it. You need to see your business as a holistic thing where you need to invest in production, obviously, hiring the right people, but you also need to invest into your admin because you need administration as the glue that holds the business together. And then you've got to invest into your marketing. So it's a holistic approach to running a business. It's not just a reactive. Marketing is not just reactive. So absolutely. So depending on how big your firm is, of course, not everyone has an unlimited budget. If you're very, very small, you won't be able to afford as much. But then on the flip side, if you're very small, then you're probably a lot more hands-on. And if you're a lot more hands-on, you can have a greater influence on the referrals that you'll get. Like when I was working in the business, I was getting lots and lots of referrals, and that was my contribution. But then as the business got larger and I was further away from the pulse of the organization, meaning the clients, then I needed to invest the money in making sure that I had a stream of referrals and a stream of clients, new clients, prospects coming into the market, into the business. So it just depends on how big you are, but generally you need 3 activities happening. If you're larger, you can have all 3 full-time, but if you're smaller, then some of them are part-time, some of them are only every now and then. And as a minimum, the grinding should be full-time, but if you're really, really small, then you may not be able to afford a full-time grinder that does all the marketing for you. You may need to look for someone that sort of is an agency. So the 3 areas that you need is you need a strategist, someone who can look at your business and run strategies for you from a marketing perspective. Then you need a manager to keep the whole thing moving forward. And the last one, as a minimum, you need is a grinder, someone to do the marketing work. So what we have is we have a marketing person that we've hired in the Philippines, and they're full-time. They do everything that requires the doing, if you like. You also need to manage that person because, often the grinder is not a manager and he's not a strategist. Because our firm is large enough, we have a full-time strategist, but often you can appoint an agency to provide the strategy, a part of your business on which direction, which market you should be pursuing, and getting deep and narrow in your target market so that the clients that come to your website, when they log into your website, they feel like they're at home because you're talking to them. It's as though you're talking directly to them. So you need to identify which market it is that you should specialize in, because if you become too general, you won't pick up the kind of clients that you want. You need to be quite narrow and deep, very specific. And a strategist helps you identify that. And then they work out where you should be doing your remarketing, your SEO, all that kind of stuff. But you may not need that strategist full time. So you may need that strategist an hour a week or an hour a month. And you pay just for that hour. The work that gets done by the marketing grinder, if you like, needs to be constant because you need that person to be marketing to your existing clients, because you need to be communicating with your existing clients. As a minimum, you need to have a newsletter, because the research shows that if you don't keep in touch with your clients for more than a month, they start to forget who you are. And whoever Johnny on the spot is, or whoever's marketing to them at the time, will take their attention away from your own firm. Now, if you're doing work with them every month, then that's fine, and you're keeping your finger on the pulse. But often clients only deal with us once a year. Just seeing them once a year is way too long. As a minimum, you should be sending them a newsletter once a month as a minimum, and not just spamming them, but giving them some really good content, some really good announcements, and some really stuff that they need, not just spam kind of stuff, but as a minimum. So you need the marketing grinder to be doing that as a minimum, and you could be running some webinars with them. You could be, as I said, the minimum is newsletters and then announcements and communicating with them. So you need that person to be doing that as a minimum. Now, I found that the marketing grinders are not always strategic. So you may need to engage someone that's strategic, but you don't need that person full time. So it just depends on how small or large your firm is. That's the level of involvement you need from a marketing perspective. You need someone to run your website. That's another minimum, because things are constantly changing, and you don't want a website that just sits there and doesn't do anything. You want it to be active, because Google gravitates to the areas that are very active. It's a very complicated arrangement in terms of your marketing, but you need to bring the experts in those 3 different areas to run your marketing properly for you.
That was a really enlightening, lesson that you taught me as well, that largely to run a good business and to be a good leader, we have to entrust and bring in the right experts to help us. That's a strategist can help for so much. They don't need to necessarily be working, like you mentioned, full-time, producing the marketing as well. That would be like trying to get a client manager to do a tax return. But a strategist is coming in with their own set of expertise. They help landscape and plan what our garden is going to look like. Even in most cases, also help you identify and hire for what the right marketing production person will look like as well. So that arrangement of that strategist and that marketing manager and then the marketing grinder, it works really well. And marketing can be something an owner, again, gets dragged into. We're trying to rack our brain for what the next 12 topics of our newsletters are going to be, when a strategist has the lay of the land and they're able to set up a program and then have the production person carry that out. And we're just focused on making sure that we've hired and we've brought in the right strategist, we can afford it, and that it's producing an outcome. So thank you for that, Ed.